Hello and welcome to our webinar on Key Trends in Hydropower, New Data and Analysis. My name is Alex Trembath and I work in the communications team at IHA, and I will be your moderator today. Last month we published a new briefing called 2017 Key Trends in Hydropower, which analyses the most significant recent developments in the hydropower sector worldwide. The briefing includes graphical information on new data, including hydropower capacity commissioned in 2016, that's broken down by region, and also worldwide distribution of pump storage. But we also bring together what we at IHA have identified as being the most significant trends affecting the hydropower sector. And we do this through a combination of things. So we conduct media monitoring throughout the year. We have our hydropower statistic database, which holds data on thousands of the world's hydropower stations. Our annual issue survey, when we take the pulse of the sector once a year to ask the opinion of people working in hydropower, what the most significant trends are, and also our outreach through international partnerships. So we bring this together into a number of publications, and Key Trends in Hydropower acts as a summary of that, and we are highlighting the new data that we've observed. In today's webinar, we're going to look at the trends highlighted in the briefing in greater depth, shining a light on the role of hydropower in a changing world and what the future may hold for the sector. You can download the briefing on our website at www.hydropower.org/publications. Before I introduce today's presenter, I would like to take a moment to explain how we will be using the webinar software today. It's a fairly intuitive system, but we want to make sure everyone is comfortable. As you can see in your control panel, your microphone is muted, so there's no need to be worried about accidentally interrupting the webinar or anything like that. During the question and answer session, which will take place after the presentation, please use the questions pane, which is located near the bottom of the control panel, to submit questions for our presenter. And you can see that here. I should mention that you can submit questions anytime you like during the presentation. We'll be keeping an eye on those and we'll be pitching them to the presenter at the end of the presentation. So please do get involved and participate, submit your questions. We'll try to take as many questions as we have time for. If you would like us to mention your name and organization when we read your question, please make sure you include those in your question submission. You can also let us know here if you're having any technical difficulties, but in the first instance, please click Help in the bar at the top of your control panel window to find answers to common problems. Finally, we are recording today's webinar, and this recording will be made available online after we finish today. Before we proceed with the webinar, I wanted to take a moment just to tell you about a major event which we will soon be hosting. So next month, on the 9th to the 11th of May, we will be hosting the 2017 World Hydropower Congress in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The event is one of the most important gatherings for hydropower decision makers and professionals, and we will be hosting it in Africa for the first time in collaboration with the African Union Commission, the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, the World Bank Group, the African Development Bank, and the Global Energy Interconnection Development and Cooperation Organization. Initiatives from government, business, finance and civil society can converge to help deliver better hydro and ultimately better development for all. So the Congress is intended to chart the course for hydropower development and operations over the coming decade with the aim to ensure reliable and resilient water and energy systems for all. It will take place following a strong global commitment to improve access to electricity and water in a climate-constrained world. The UN Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement will provide a powerful backdrop to the discussions, and the Congress will feature a range of high-level speakers representing governments, the finance sector, civil society, academia and industry. And now I'm very pleased to introduce you to today's presenter, Bill Girling. So Bill joined the International Hydropower Association in 2016 as Interim Director of our Hydropower Development Work Programme. And in this capacity, Bill oversees our work across a broad range of topics, including climate mitigation and adaptation, water consumption, the macroeconomic benefits of hydropower, finance and investment, and clean energy systems. Bill also coordinates workshops, webinars and other key initiatives to build and share knowledge around sustainable hydropower development. He has 35 years of experience from the Canadian hydropower sector, having worked for the most of his career as a hydropower planning engineer at Manitoba Hydro, and his experience includes leading on economic studies of the refurbishment of aging hydropower facilities, the coordination of asset management optimization studies, and providing technical expertise for climate change impact and adaptation studies. Bill also has extensive experience in organising and chairing numerous technical conferences and seminars, both within Manitoba Hydro and also as a former president of the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of Manitoba. So without further ado, it's my pleasure who will be giving his presentation.
Thank you, Alex. And thanks to all of you for joining us today and for giving IHA the opportunity to share the summary of the 2017 Key Trends in Hydropower with all of our partners, members, and those of you who joined the webinar today. As most of you know, IHA is a non-profit mutual association established to advance sustainable hydropower. Our members and partners are active in over 100 countries, and we have 4 strategic objectives around which our work program is focused. The first of those is advancing policies and strategies for the hydropower sector, building a vibrant community amongst our sector and our partners, creating a platform for knowledge through events such as today, and delivering value to our members. We also work very closely together with other renewable technologies. So as shown here in this picture from, I believe, a COP21 event, we work in an association called REN Alliance, which is a compilation of all of the major renewable technologies: wind, solar, geothermal, and biomass, all working together on common goals to advance renewable technologies together. We have a very extensive work program at IHA. We're active in 9 key topics in hydropower development, as shown on the left-hand side of this slide. All of which are relevant to the sector and have some importance in particular parts of the world. And as well, we work continually on sustainability assessment as part of our program. On the right-hand side is the way in which we deliver our work program through events such as today, webinars. We are also very active in sector monitoring. We keep tabs on the hydropower development on an annual basis, and we're constantly updating our database. We put out a number of briefings and concept notes throughout the year, and we're constantly growing our network of expertise, and that is a key to our success. This is a simple depiction in REN 21's report from last year, showing how hydropower has contributed 17% of all renewable energy to the electricity sector. Worth noting also is that hydropower is the leading renewable source for electricity generation globally, supplying 3/4 of all renewable electricity. This is an illustration of the total installed capacity of hydropower, as you would have seen in our Key Trends document, showing that at the end of 2016 there was approximately 1,246 gigawatts of installed hydropower capacity. And not much different than last year. That is residing largely in countries such as China, United States, Brazil, and Canada, out of the top 21 countries with hydropower installed in their renewable energy mix. But of importance is there are 150 countries in total that rely on hydropower in the world today. But what's also quite interesting is that in 2016, the estimated generation from hydropower was over 4,100 terawatt hours, which is the single largest contribution from a renewable energy source ever recorded. In 2016, this shows that 31.5 gigawatts of new hydropower capacity, including 6.4 gigawatts of pumped storage, were installed around the world. In obvious places like China and Brazil, that was dominated, but as you can see, there are still a lot of countries that are developing hydropower around the globe. In this graphical depiction, you can see that the distribution around the world of where the 1,246 gigawatts in the blue dots was built and what the associated generation is with that installed capacity in 2016. But the larger circles depict the potential for hydropower out to 2050, and it shows that hydropower generation could still significantly increase by roughly 60 to 70% by 2050. So I'll quickly go through the key trends that you've seen in your document, the key trends document, and then we're going to touch on each one of those individually. So starting off with initiatives are being established to manage the risk profile of hydropower. We'll talk about a hydropower support facility that is currently underway to ensure that hydropower projects get built in the right place. As I mentioned earlier, renewables are now working together much more readily to provide grid stability. The role of pumped hydropower storage is changing and is having to evolve to meet energy storage requirements. Ultra-high voltage transmission is a new emerging trend in the world that's connecting hydropower to markets, and global energy interconnection is a key topic at our World Hydropower Congress this year. New priorities are being placed on emerging trends to undergo smart modernization and digitization of assets, not only to ensure that hydropower's aging assets can continue to operate and their life can be extended, but to also ensure that hydropower can work together with other renewables. Reporting mechanisms for hydropower's carbon footprint are advancing, and as we've reported on a number of times in our documents, we are working together with the World Bank on developing a tool called the GRES tool, which I'll talk about later, and is very, very important to the development of hydropower for financing purposes. Financing institutions are also placing a much greater emphasis on climate resilience now, and to no surprise, hydropower is now having to come up with ways of demonstrating that projects can be built with resilience to climate change trends. And finally, the tools for reporting on sustainability are diversifying. There is now a need for a more versatile sustainability assessment protocol tool, particularly when it comes to project financing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So I mentioned the hydropower preparation support facility. The concept of a hydropower preparation support facility has been around for some time. The concept is that a facility would manage a revolving fund which would leverage investment in sustainable system supporting hydropower in targeted countries and regions where it is underutilized, such as in Africa. And the idea is it would reduce the financial risk by funding the early stage planning, such as the feasibility studies, the preliminary designs, and the necessary permit approvals, and then would create a project blueprint which could then be auctioned and developed by the private sector. So the momentum is building for the establishment of support facility for hydropower preparation in places like Africa. And it's also very important because for hydropower to become eligible for things like climate bonds, there has to be better project preparation and a demonstration that project can be built and that private investment will continue to evolve. We talked a little bit about renewables working together for grid stability. Innovative projects coupling renewable technologies are now providing firm, stable power to the grid, while also increasing individual efficiencies and creating net benefits. So much of the work IHA are doing on this topic has to do with the concept of hydropower working inside clean energy systems, providing not only the clean energy attributes of a hydropower system on its own, but the features that hydropower can bring to integrate variable renewable resources in an energy system, such as wind and solar working together inside a system with hydropower. On this slide, on the left-hand side, we're showing that there are existing renewables working together in places like Iceland, where they have wind, hydro, and geothermal working together in a system to provide reliable renewable energy supply. And as you move across the screen, you'll see there are new innovative technologies such as floating PV, solar panels floating in hydropower reservoirs that are producing reliable electricity and taking advantage of the storage reservoirs that exist. There are other new technologies such as gravity storage shown on the right-hand side, where innovative technologies for providing storage through in-ground systems, and the picture in the center showing a small reservoir at the base of a hydro turbine is an innovative technology in Germany, and a future system that is being planned in Chile called the Esfero de Tarapaca system, which is a full hybrid system of wind, solar, and hydropower all working together. I mentioned that pumped hydropower storage is evolving. It's still really the only form of electricity storage available on a large scale and at a competitive cost, and continues to grow, adding over 6 gigawatts in 2016, and I believe there are now over 150 gigawatts of pumped hydropower storage installed around the world, very much the largest form of electricity storage that exists now. Pumped hydropower storage technologies are evolving with changing energy systems. Variable speed technology is now being utilized to provide additional flexibility during the generation mode and the pumping mode. And innovative wind hydropower pump storage systems are being constructed, such as the Matrospec project in Germany. We talked a little bit about ultra-high voltage energy interconnections. The concept of a globally energy interconnection is now emerging as one of the latest trends in the development of major interconnections regionally and on an intercontinental scale to enable the massive growth in renewable energy technologies to meet the world's energy demand. So things like subsea cables, marine cables are really no longer a technical or physical barrier in terms of interconnecting continents. In places like Africa, we're now seeing that in Eastern Africa, the sub-Saharan system is now being interconnected with countries that have existing infrastructure, and will certainly enable hydropower development to move forward in that country. Smart modernization and digitization is now evolving as a new trend. Asset management is becoming increasingly challenging across the sector as a growing number of hydropower assets are reaching the end of their expected life. By 2050, it's estimated that roughly half of the entire fleet of existing hydropower equipment will likely require modernization in some form. The digitization of hydropower plants, control systems, and surrounding networks is an emerging industry trend that promises to optimize asset management and performance. For example, the digitization of hydropower systems is increasingly being implemented to allow hydro to work together with other renewables, provide increased flexibility, enhance control systems for better ancillary services such as frequency control, balancing services, and the like, as shown on this slide. IHA, as we mentioned, has been engaged in an international research initiative aimed at developing a framework for calculating the net greenhouse gas emissions from freshwater reservoirs. And the tool, as you've probably heard of a number of times in the past, is called the GRES tool. The GRES tool is designed to accurately estimate hydropower's carbon footprint by taking into account pre-impoundment emissions specific to each reservoir, as well as the multiple services provided by that reservoir. And as hydropower investors and lenders are currently seeking to further refine guidelines on eligibility criteria for hydropower, there is a significant risk that hydropower could be excluded from some mechanisms due to the perceived greenhouse gas emissions from hydropower reservoirs. So it's extremely important that we have this tool in place and accepted amongst the hydropower sector to ensure that the greenhouse gas footprint is properly and appropriately represented. There's also a need amongst the financial institutions to address climate-related risk by ensuring projects are planned and operated to be resilient to climate change. Resilience and adaptation measures have to be communicated clearly and simply to investors. And for that reason, the World Bank has launched a new study to develop guidelines for designing resilient projects, and where possible, enabling them to take advantage of opportunities arising from climate change. These guidelines would ensure that projects are safe and reliable and provide adaptation services to incentivize policy and investment. So as I mentioned, the World Bank has recently convened sector experts to outline a vision for these guidelines, And it was agreed at a recent meeting that they should cover practical risk assessment and mitigation. And it is our hope that we will have a preliminary set of those guidelines available at the upcoming World Hydropower Congress in Addis, which Alex will talk a little bit more about as we get further into the presentation. And finally, the Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Protocol is well known and has become broadly recognized as the primary tool for evaluating sustainability performance. The range in the tool's application has grown from full assessments through to guided internal assessments that are playing a strong role in building internal capacity. New initiatives, however, such as green and climate bonds are increasingly recognizing the protocol, and for that reason, a derivative tool, a more focused tool for assessment of industry good practices is currently under development. I will now turn it back to Alex, and he'll tell you a little bit more about the World Hydropower Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for your presentation. And before we move on to take some questions, as Bill mentioned, I would just like to take a moment to talk about how the topics that we're discussing today tie in very closely with the agenda at the World Hydropower Congress. So as we've identified these topics as representing the most important challenges for the sector today, we've built the backbone of the agenda for the Congress around them. So each of the trends that we've discussed today will be subject to a dedicated session at the Congress. And in addition, we'll be featuring a range of other focus sessions and special lunchtime presentations on relevant initiatives. I would also like to mention that participants at the Congress will have the opportunity to experience some of Africa's technical hydropower achievements and natural and cultural sites. You can find out more about the Congress on our website at www.hydropower.org/congress, where you can find out details about each of the sessions, and you can also register on the website. So moving forward, before we pose some of the questions that have already come in to Bill, I'd just like to remind you how to use the questions pane if you missed the start of the webinar. So you can submit your questions using the questions pane, which is located near the bottom of the control panel. We're going to try and take as many of your questions as we have time for. If you want us to mention your name and organization when we read your question, please make sure you include those in your question submission. So I'm going to begin with this question for Bill. So in your key trends publication, you have highlighted how pump storage development is accelerating. Does this mean that conventional hydropower is taking a backseat to pump storage? Bill, can you answer that question?
Sure. No, I don't think it is. I believe that conventional hydropower storage will continue to be developed in the countries where it is appropriate and well planned, and where traditionally can move forward. It has its own role, and we are very hopeful that storage hydropower still continues to be developed in the appropriate places. Pumped hydropower storage is being developed at an accelerating pace, largely due to the growth in the massive growth in solar and wind power that has taken place over the last, really the last decade, but more recently in the last few years. And as the most well understood and most reliable source of energy storage currently today at a grid scale, I don't think that's going to affect really or impact on the development of conventional hydropower. It's just that it simply is being accelerated to provide that energy storage that is required, and in some cases the only way that you can provide that energy storage reliably. So no, I don't think it will dramatically affect it.
Thank you, Bill. And sticking with the same theme, we've had a question, another question on pump storage. So what are the range of costs associated with pump storage? I realize every situation will be unique, but is there a range that you use? And this person says that the levelized cost of energy is what they're interested in. So do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm sorry that I don't have those figures at hand. It's certainly something that we will promise to provide after the webinar. The levelized cost of pumped hydropower storage is somewhat different than the levelized cost of conventional hydropower storage, in that it is always very site specific to where the resource is available to build a new pumped hydropower storage facility. In some cases, it can be done in conjunction with an existing facility where the cost can be kept minimal. But I'm sorry, I don't have those figures at hand. And if you leave your name, we will promise to get back to you. And the person who has that information works within IHA and certainly can provide that.
Thank you, Bill. Moving on to the next question. So this question is, how is hydropower's role going to change within the renewable energy sector?
Okay. The role of hydropower is already changing within the renewable energy sector. We did touch upon how hydropower is now trying to be built in a way that it can actually be built as a hybrid system. So where there's perhaps new development that can take place, let's say, take Africa, for instance, as an example, an energy system plan can be developed and should be developed, looking at where the most appropriate sites for hydropower development can be sited, and what the energy needs are for the system that you're providing it to, and look at whether there's perhaps a need for a larger scale hydropower storage in conjunction with wind and solar, and how those can be sited to work most effectively together. So this is what we were alluding to earlier on, is that with appropriate hydropower support facility funds in place, that kind of development can take place. Now, where there is existing systems in place already and hydropower is already in place, there still is a trend towards taking advantage of the flexibility of hydropower to work together with renewables, which are going to continue to grow in almost every jurisdiction, and take advantage of the attributes that hydropower can bring. And that can be done in a number of ways. It can be done through using the existing hydropower units for the flexibility and energy storage, and to provide the balancing services that are there. Or in some cases, an interconnection may need to be built to ensure that hydropower can be brought to the country or the jurisdiction that is looking to take advantage of that renewable technology. Despite what's going on in the United States, I still believe that there is still going to be a move forward to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, and that most countries are still going to be moving forwards with hydropower development to ensure that they meet those renewable energy targets. So that is in essence how I see hydropower working inside the renewable energy world.
Thank you very much, Bill. And going to stick with the thread of renewable energy and also pump storage, because a lot of the questions that are coming in concern these topics. So the next question is from Raul Bastos, a hydro consultant from Portugal, and he says, the way hydropower can continue to grow is to increase the projects with pump storage in countries with solar and wind. Do you agree?
Do I agree that the way in which hydropower is being developed is to build pumped hydropower storage? Is that the correct connotation of that question, Alex?
I read the question as being the best path to growth for hydropower is continuing to increase pump storage projects in countries that are also developing solar and wind.
Where it's appropriate to put pumped hydropower storage in, yes. Pumped hydropower storage is not the only means by which hydropower can contribute energy storage. Conventional hydropower storage can as well. So as I mentioned earlier, where it's appropriate to build a project with storage, with a reservoir, it's actually advantageous and in some cases cost effective to do so because of the multiple benefits that come from building a reservoir. You get the additional macroeconomic benefits from a reservoir project. You get the job creation, the additional benefits in some cases of having irrigation, recreation, navigation, and as well as the energy storage capability for climate resilience. So there's many advantages to having a conventional hydropower project in some cases. So it's not categorically that pumped hydropower storage should be the place to go immediately when there's an injection of wind and solar. As I said, in some cases that can also be achieved just by building an interconnection. So where I come from in Canada, there's quite a large growth of wind in the central part of the United States, and the hydropower systems that are to the north are being utilized simply through interconnections to provide that energy storage and flexibility. And so there isn't really a requirement in that situation for pumped hydropower storage. However, in some cases it may be appropriate to consider that. It is very site specific, and it comes to the cost, of course.
Thank you very much, Bill. We've had a question from a participant saying, can we get a recording of this webinar? I can confirm that we are confirming the webinar and we'll be making the recording available afterwards. So yes, we'll email it to all participants in the webinar, and it will also be available on our website. I'm going to take one more question on the pumped storage thread before we move on to other topics. So this is Dietmar from ABB Austria. A considerable number of potential pumped storage projects in Germany or Austria are on hold. What do you think will bring them back on track?
Okay, so the situation in Europe is a bit unique. I believe what you're referring to are some of the projects that were planned in Austria that seemingly were ready to go, were cost-effective, sited, and what happened was the energy market in the United States, in the EU, basically the bottom dropped out, and it's now in a situation where they're almost seeing a negative marginal price. So there's really no incentive to continue to develop pumped hydropower storage in that environment. So it's very much a market issue in the EU. What will change that, we believe at IHA, is there's a need for a policy to be in place to incentivize hydropower development and to de-incentivize the use of thermal resources through perhaps an appropriate carbon pricing in the EU. Currently, there's a massive incentive in the EU for developing wind and solar. There's all kinds of mechanisms in place that offer additional incentives, financial incentives for doing so, but unfortunately the hydropower that's existing right now will never be appropriately compensated for. The ancillary services are not compensated for, so they're just really allowed to operate in the traditional way with no additional incentive. And so that has created a problem. In fact, there's situations where it's almost more economic for them not to run. So this situation is very difficult in the EU, and I believe, and IHA believes, that the only way is for us to demonstrate how an appropriate policy that would get correct carbon premiums in place and that would allow for appropriate compensation for the ancillary services that hydro can provide, the flexibility and balancing services, for that to take place, and then perhaps that tide will turn.
Thank you, Bill. And we are receiving quite a high volume of questions. I'm going to continue to work through these. Please do continue to submit. We'll take as many questions as we have time for. I'm going to move on from pumped storage now. So we've had some questions around the topic of risk. So, Bill, in your view, what are the key challenges facing hydropower operation with respect to electricity market risk?
Electricity market risk. Okay. So hydropower operations from a market risk perspective really is country specific. We just talked about the risk of operating in countries in the EU. There's really less risk in countries like in North America, where there still is a market for export, albeit a very flat market, but the market is still there. So the challenges for operating hydropower will constantly be, from a market perspective, will constantly be related to the policies that are in place in the country. Where there are policies in place, such as perhaps you're seeing in some of the Nordic countries, there may be advances to reduce that market risk, but really it's different all over the world, and so it's very difficult for me to give a kind of a general answer about that. But I think the example in the EU is probably the prime example of where something significant has to change in order for hydropower development to continue to move forward in a developed area such as that. In less developed countries, the risk is not so much a market risk as it is a political and regulatory risk in terms of getting hydropower projects in place. And so in places like Africa, that's really what's standing in the way. The market may be there, but it's actually getting a project in the ground. That's the true challenge. So I hope I've answered that question in some form.
Thank you, Bill. So the next question, this is Arif from Ample Power. We are a small company working on developing 2 hydropower project sites of 1 to 2 megawatts each in Pakistan. Can we leverage the hydropower preparation support facility, and what other such facilities are available?
Well, first I'll point out that the hydropower preparation support facility is a concept right now. I don't think it's specific to only larger scale projects. The concept is the same, that it's ensuring that the appropriate projects are built in the appropriate place. However, what I will say is that it's intended really to be part of a bigger energy plan. It isn't specifically to put money into a specific project. The concept is to step back from the project level and look at the system. The system level has to be appropriately planned first. So for instance, in Africa, there has been quite a bit of discussion around could they perhaps build a lot of smaller projects in a shorter period of time with less impediment to getting that hydropower developed. Well, in a situation like that, what's needed is for the energy planning, the ministry, to take a look at the needs of that country and determine, is it maybe more appropriate to consider a larger scale project, a medium-sized project that can provide those energy storage benefits and provide the community with the water supply that they need, a drinking water supply, and all of the benefits that come with having that energy storage. And perhaps it's more cost effective to do so than it is to have, say, 30 or 40 small projects. So my answer to your question is really that the concept is to ensure that it's not just the single project is built at the right site with the appropriate technologies, to ensure that the system is planned appropriately so that the suite of proper projects are built in the right locations. So I hope that gives you a little better concept of what the hydropower preparation support facility is really intended for.
Thank you, Bill. We have a question now that relates to hydropower's renewable qualities. So, do you see differences between small hydropower plants and hydropower plants in terms of being considered clean and renewable energy?
And the short answer to that is no. Hydropower, the purpose of IHA is that we were born in an era where there was great challenges to building projects of any significant size, and really the purpose of our organization is to ensure that all hydropower is built sustainably, and that can be done at any scale. We try not to differentiate between small and large. We purposely don't use the terminology. So really, whether you're talking about a microturbine or a massive number of microturbines being put in place in an existing reservoir or river system, or whether you're developing a medium-scale hydropower project with a storage reservoir, the principles are the same. There has to be a consideration of the environmental and social aspects of the project. In cases where it's appropriate, the protocol can be used to determine that. And then the siting of those projects has to be considered with an appropriate energy plan. And again, we'll talk about the hydropower support facility as a way of doing that. But really, the answer is that you have to consider all hydropower, whether it's 100 megawatts developed through small 1 kilowatt units or one single 100 megawatt unit. It all has to be considered with the same principles in mind. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Bill. I'd now like to take a couple of questions that are specific to particular countries or regions. The next question is more of a statement or a comment, but I think I'll read this out, and Bill, see if you can add your thoughts to this. So this comment is that in countries like India, water storage of big reservoirs is an urgent need to cater to agriculture, irrigation, and even drinking water for populations in far-flung villages. Hence, multi-purpose hydropower schemes shall offer solutions for the macro-sized problems and needs of the country. Providing water for drinking needs through tankers by roads and trains is certainly not going to be adequate. Thus, hydropower shall be relevant for countries like India, and the solar and wind power schemes can only be short-term solutions for power needs only. Hence, long-term policies and strategies are needed to cater for this aspect with regards to multi-purpose hydropower. Do you have any thoughts on that? Would you like to react to that comment, please, Bill?
Well, I think that's a very well-written statement. I think IHA agrees with everything you said. India is a challenge. Our CEO has been there many times, meeting with the ministry. There seems to be some light at the end of the tunnel in India for policy change. They're doing what they can now to lift their policy on only small hydro, and I certainly think that it's IHA's responsibility and role to continue to impress upon those who are going to make decisions in India that there's a tremendous amount that can be gained by building projects of a significant size in places like India, where there is tremendous resource to do so. As you pointed out already, there are all kinds of sites that can be developed and that could probably provide immense benefits to the communities. But yes, the policy has to be in place, and there has to be a will and a need for it to take place and for it to happen. So we're continuing to work together with those partners of ours and our member countries, companies in India to help advance that.
I've just got another question about regarding India, actually, which is, are there reports by IHA on hydropower development and challenges in India? And I can answer this. So we produce many publications, but our flagship publication, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a while, is the Hydropower Status Report, which expands a lot more on the trends we've been talking about today, but we also include regional and country analysis. We include a selection of country profiles, which summarizes the most recent hydropower development. In the 2016 Hydropower Status Report, which is available on our website, there is a country profile of India, and we will shortly be publishing the 2017 Hydropower Status Report, and there will be an update on activity in India in our regional overview of South and Central Asia. And we produce a range of briefings on topics around the year which often have relevance to certain regions and certain countries. So if you check out the publication section on our website, there should be some more information there that you can find. Another country-specific question now. So what sorts of technical innovations will be necessary in order to develop new hydropower facilities in the US, and what mechanisms will need to change for regulatory approval? And in addition to this question is, it would also include this question would also include harnessing water power at non-powered dams in the US. So can you respond to that, please, Bill?
Okay, the short answer to that is there's a very good report that was produced by the Department of Energy in the United States, and it was featured at the last Hydrovision Conference in Minneapolis. It lays out precisely the types of technologies you refer to: retrofitting existing infrastructure, taking advantage of existing waterways and putting in whatever technologies are available, and there's many of them evolving right now. Microturbines, GE and Voith are both bringing some examples of that to our Congress, and continuing to develop pumped hydropower storage where they can. There's no secret that there's other challenges in the United States right now that are far beyond the technical challenges. The technical challenges have always been there in the United States. All of the major hydropower that could have been developed with the best return on investment have probably already taken place. But that's not to say that they haven't got potential. It's much more challenging, and probably the levelized cost of those is going to be a little bit higher because of some of the challenges of doing anything significant in some of those regions. Retrofitting existing hydro can be well planned and well thought out, but in principle can sometimes come with its own set of challenges. I would encourage you to read that report. It's quite a good report, and it does outline in great detail all of the possible options that they can do. I think it's called 50 by 2050, and it outlines 50 gigawatts of potential growth in the United States, which is a massive amount when you consider that it's largely coming from modernization, increased efficiencies, increasing the discharge capability of existing facilities, and then retrofitting existing infrastructure. But that is going to come with its challenges, and I think companies like GE with their digitization are going to be looking at taking advantage of some of those situations where they can introduce new technologies that can be retrofitted. So I hope that's a suitable answer.
Thank you, Bill. We have run a couple of minutes over. We have got lots of questions continuing to come in. I'm just going to take a couple more. Very sorry if we haven't managed to get around to your question today. If you have anything you'd like to follow up and ask, you can email us at communications@hydropower.org, and we'll do our best to respond to you. Just going to round off with a couple more questions. Now, we've had some more questions about hybrid systems that have come in since we covered hybrids and pump storage at the beginning of the Q&A section, but we've had a couple more in, so I'm going to take one more of those questions. So, can such hybrid systems not be developed on existing hydropower plants by adding wind and or solar?
The answer is yes, of course. Where it's economic to do so, the marriage of a hydropower system with a wind and solar system can be done in a planned fashion where the entire system is planned. Excuse me, but where there's existing hydropower in place. There already are examples, I believe, in China where they have done exactly that, where they've taken advantage of an existing pumped hydropower storage plant that was there for its traditional shifting role, and they've now taken advantage of that energy storage and placed turbines, wind turbines and solar panels in place. There, of course, has to be a wind resource and an appropriate place to site the solar panels or whatever other technology they're considering. That's a renewable technology, but where it's appropriate to site those, that can be taken advantage of. I will also point out that, as I said earlier on in the presentation, it doesn't necessarily have to be geographically located near a hydropower site, where it's appropriate to build an interconnection, then it really doesn't matter. Well, I suppose there is a geographic limit, but you could be thousands of kilometers away from a hydropower site and still be able to take advantage of the benefits of that project if there's an existing interconnection that can be taken advantage of to bring that hydropower flexibility to that renewable system.
Okay, another question. This question relates specifically to photovoltaics. So what do you think, so this is a technical question, how could floating photovoltaics be used in reservoirs or peaking reservoirs which have problems of large floating debris?
That's an excellent question. I honestly don't know the answer to that. I believe they have had to deal with that in some of the floating reservoirs, floating photovoltaic reservoirs in South America. It's certainly a challenge. There's obviously extra infrastructure that has to be built to ensure that like booms, I suppose, and where it's appropriate to contain the panels inside a contained area. But not being a floating solar PV expert, I wouldn't want to go too far with my projections, but I believe there are examples in some countries that have already gone ahead with significant sized reservoirs where they've added large volumes of floating panels, and I think this is a new and emerging technology that's going to develop increasingly over time, and so they're obviously going to be coming up with schemes that will perhaps raise them out of the water a little bit, or provide protective booms and that sort of thing. But I'm sorry, I don't have a very specific answer for you, not being an expert.
Okay, thank you, Bill. And I'm just going to this is going to be the final question for today. So this is from Vivek Sadevra from GMR Upper Karnali Hydropower Limited in Nepal. So first of all, he has a comment about climate bonds. So to avail the benefits of climate bonds, the project should be operational or projects in construction or pre-financial closure phase. But then he asks, is there any megawatt cap of hydropower projects to be eligible for climate bonds benefits?
The answer to that is that the eligibility criteria, at least for the climate bonds initiative that IHA are working on right now, are still being developed. The idea is to not exclude projects of size, but to ensure that all projects get an equal treatment in terms of, are they climate resilient? Are they built sustainably? Are they meeting the appropriate social and environmental aspects? And do they have a greenhouse gas emission value that is within the targets that the Climate Bonds Initiative are identifying? So those are currently the criteria. It's not a size at this point in time. And so, for instance, there could be projects of a smaller scale that could end up being excluded if, for instance, they turned out to have a relatively high greenhouse gas emission value associated with them, or if they were not built sustainably, or if they were not climate resilient because they were built without those considerations in mind. So the idea for climate bonds financing is to ensure that all three of those criteria are met. And so hopefully there will not be a cap placed on them. I can't pretend to know what the size limit could have been in other bond issues around the world. Again, I'm not an expert on all of the climate bonds and green bonds that have been already issued, but I don't believe there are caps in place for those currently. But I do know about the Climate Bonds Initiative, and that the criteria just defined to you are intended to not make them exclusive to size.
Thank you very much, Bill. And that concludes the Q&A section of today's webinar. Just got a few more initiatives and other elements to update you on before we close off today, and also a survey of today's webinar. Very finally, before we move away from the questions, someone has asked, would it be possible to speak to someone after the webinar concerning the financing of such hybrid projects? If you'd like to drop us an email on communications@hydropower.org, just outlining some more of the nature of what it is you're interested in, we'll be happy to have a look and get back to you. So yes, before we close off today, I mentioned earlier about our hydropower status report. In May 2017, at the World Hydropower Congress, we're going to be launching the new edition, the 27 Hydropower Status Report. The key trends briefing on which this webinar was centered is actually a precursor to the status report. So the hydropower status report covers a lot of the same trends, but goes into much more detail. We include in-depth articles and analysis on lots of these topics. We also do a thorough regional breakdown, overview, analysis of what's going on in each of the hydropower regions around the world. We include a selection of country profiles. We also have created various maps and infographics on this year. We're including a new map and graphic on transmission lines. There's also updated graphics on new hydropower installed capacity and generation and potential. And that's going to be published next month. We'll be launching it in Addis Ababa at the World Hydropower Congress, and it will be available on our website. Our website, hydropower.org, is basically the hub of information on hydropower that we've been developing over the years. All of the knowledge building work that we do, we try to produce content and information, briefings, that you can find a range of maps, country profiles, blog articles, news, hydropower events. All of this we keep on our website. So if you visit hydropower.org, we keep this up to date on a regular basis. So please do come on over and have a look at what you can find on hydropower.org. So finally, we'd appreciate it if you can stay with us just for a few moments more after the webinar to complete a short survey on your experience today. This should launch in the webinar viewer after we finish, but if you have any problem accessing it, don't worry, you will also receive a link to the survey by email. It's only 3 questions, and this will really help us to improve on similar initiatives in the future. So all that remains is for me to once again thank Bill for his presentation and to thank all of you for participating in the webinar today. I thought we had a very good question and answer discussion, so thank you for getting involved. It really helps to enrich the program of events like this. So thank you very much, and please feel free to send us any feedback on today's webinar that you may have. We look forward to continuing the conversation and building and sharing knowledge on the global hydropower sector with you in future. So have a good day.